The documentary you're about to see required some courage on the part of those who took the most revealing films, and the Westinghouse Broadcasting Company, which gave this program national attention in spite of great pressure to keep this film from the American public. The dolphin, commonly called the porpoise, has held fascination for man since the first recorded histories. Early seafaring people, like the Greeks, who watched the dolphins playfully riding the waves in front of their boats, could only explain the animal's obvious intelligence by saying that the dolphin must be a god in animal form. They have no significant natural enemies, but in the last few years a predator has arisen, one like no other in nature. It kills not for food nor sport. The dolphins die simply because they are in the way, an inconvenience, a worthless byproduct. 3 years ago, that predator killed more than 250,000 dolphins in the eastern Pacific. And some scientists estimate that unless something is done to stop the slaughter, we may be presiding over the last days of the dolphins. Unless you happen to be an ocean-going sailor, probably your only contact with dolphins is through an aquarium or a place like Marine World, Africa, USA in Northern California. The animals have only been kept in captivity since the First World War, and it's just been in the last few years that anybody even thought of teaching them to do these kinds of stunts.
You want to come up here and say hello to everybody, huh? Come on.
So trainers like Jim Mullen are staking out new territory. It turns out to be a learning experience for the dolphins and the trainers.
In my own experience, dolphins are unlike any other animal. And I think the key here with these animals is that they have no natural fear of man. They sort of accept him as another warm-blooded mammal. As far as training is concerned, they accept readily. It's sort of a not I have to do, but I want to do for you.
Under pressure from foreign competition and an increasing demand for tuna, most of the United States fleet has converted to a new way of fishing called purse seining, even though it meant huge expenditures for larger, more sophisticated boats. And in this method, the porpoise was no longer an innocent and unscathed bystander. Once a herd of dolphins is sighted by the lookout, 3 or 4 high-powered speedboats are lowered from the mother boat. The speedboats chase down the dolphins at speeds up to 40 miles an hour, tiring them out and herding them into a tight group. Then the mother boat approaches the dolphin herd and drops a skiff, which takes one end of the net and anchors it. The mother boat then encircles the dolphin herd as it deploys the net until it comes around and meets the skiff. The bottom of the net is closed off much the same way you'd close a drawstring purse. The dolphin herd and the school of tuna, who never part company, are trapped. When researchers first got permission to go out on the tuna boats in the late 60s, they found out that purse seining was the culprit, the reason dead porpoises were showing up at dockside back in San Diego and Los Angeles. And they also found that those that came back in the holes were just a small percentage of the hundreds of thousands being killed through purse seining.
And they get tangled up and twisted where they'll drown underwater. When they get their beaks or their fins caught, and the harder the dolphins pull and struggle to get out, the more entangled they get in it.
This man is also a fisherman. He consented to be interviewed, but only if we would protect his identity.
I've seen over 2,000 porpoise killed in one setting. You close up the bottom of the net, and the porpoise are inside with the tuna fish underneath them. We happened to trap maybe 2,000, maybe more porpoises at one time. There was a lot of young babies inside the net, and they weren't moving. They were in shock. They were afraid. And the animals just started dying. They'd go down, and they'd come up, and they'd be dead.
There's a large scoop. It's almost like an ice cream scoop that scoops the dolphin and the fish out of the net, and they're dropped on the deck. My job as a fisherman was to station myself in such a position that I could throw the tuna into the wells and throw dolphin overboard. The dolphins sit out on the hot deck, and I guess after about 30 seconds, they start losing water, and they just die of exhaustion and heat, and they lie their tongues up to half an hour.
In order to solve the entanglement problem, in 1971, a fisherman developed the Medina panel, a smaller mesh section placed at the portion of the net that is lowered during backing down. The fisherman said this new panel would keep the dolphins from getting their beaks and fins caught in the net. Based on the fishermen's assurances that they had ways to stop the killing if they were given time to put them into effect, when Congress passed the Marine Mammals Protection Act of 1972, the industry was given a special exclusion. The act said the fishermen had 2 years to get the deaths down, in the words of the law, to insignificant levels approaching zero. The Commerce Department's National Marine Fisheries Service was charged with being sure that happened. The National Marine Fisheries Service began by putting observers on the tuna boats. And by the end of 1972, they estimated that more than 250,000 dolphins had been killed in the tuna nets that year. This evening, you've gotten a short course on a complicated and obviously very controversial issue. The fishermen say they're concerned about dolphins because they need them to catch tuna. They point out that the Medina panel and the back-down procedure were developed by the industry, and they say that they're working, that most of the deaths now come during what they call problem sets. The National Marine Fisheries Service claims that they're doing the best they can with the limited funds given to them by Congress. But environmentalists charge that neither the industry nor the Fisheries Service is doing enough. They remind us that more than 100,000 dolphins died in the nets last year, and the Commerce Department had said that that figure would be cut in half this year. The observer reports aren't in as yet, but early indications are they will not meet that goal, and that in fact, the deaths will be at least as high as last year. The congressional subcommittee that ultimately must decide this issue will be holding hearings the end of this month. Several Bay Area congressmen are members of that committee. Congressman Robert Leggett of Vallejo is chairman. So if you want to make your views known, write Congressman Leggett at the Rayburn Office Building, Washington, D.C. Dr. Kenneth Norris and other scientists that we talk to think this problem can be solved, and that if we start now, we can do it. But if not, someday, you may have to explain to your grandchildren why you were around and did nothing during the last days of the dolphins.
I think that asking what the value of any wild animal is an example of human arrogance in which we put prices on nature, so to speak, as if we really owned nature, and of course we don't. So I find it impossible to say what is the value of a porpoise in the ocean or a whale, for example, except to say that in emotional terms I know my world isn't complete if they're gone.